Let them laugh. The punchline is you. Welcome in, my dear chosen one. Not by accident, not by luck. This is that kind of moment where life stops whispering and starts speaking in full volume. You didn't just end up here. You arrived right when the script flips, right when the people who got comfortable doubting you start feeling the ground shift under their feet. And before your mind tries to talk you out of it, let me say it plainly, that fire in you didn't survive this long just to die quietly. They tried to label you. They tried to shrink you. They tried to make your slow seasons sound like your final season. They called you weak, confused, behind, not like the others. They watched you struggle up close and treated your pain like proof. They smiled in your face and took notes on your setbacks like they were collecting trophies. And the wild part? Some of them needed you to stay broken so they could keep feeling whole. But listen to me, chosen one. You're still here. That alone is the first slap to your enemy's ego, because your enemy isn't always a stranger. Sometimes it's the person who knows your story and still chooses to twist it. Sometimes it's the one who claps the loudest when you lose, then goes quiet when you win. Sometimes it's family who doesn't hate you loudly, just doubts you consistently. And that kind of doubt is a cage built out of concern. So here's the quote you need to tattoo on your mindset today. They didn't want you dead. They wanted you dependent. That's why they hated your confidence. That's why they hated your boundaries. That's why they hated your quiet. Because your quiet wasn't weakness. Your quiet was you refusing to give them a front row seat to your strategy. You've probably asked yourself questions you never say out loud. Why do they get uncomfortable when I walk in? Why do they suddenly act weird when I start doing better? Why do they avoid eye contact when I don't even brag? Why do they switch the topic when someone praises me? Let me answer it without sugarcoating it, because your presence is becoming a reminder of what they refuse to do with their own life. See, chosen one, some people don't hate you. They hate what your growth exposes in them. That's why they called you slow. Because if they admitted you were building, they'd have to admit they were stalling. That's why they called you confused. Because if they admitted you were learning, they'd have to admit they were hiding. That's why they called you weak. Because if they admitted you were enduring, they'd have to admit they fold under pressure. And you're the kind of person pressure didn't destroy. Pressure introduced you to you. Let me give you a picture. Imagine a blade being sharpened. From the outside, it looks like nothing is happening, just friction, just scraping, just heat. But every pass makes it deadlier, cleaner, more precise. That was your quiet season. They looked at your life and thought you were being worn down. They didn't realize you were being refined. They thought you were losing time. You were gaining edge. And now you're stepping into a phase where the same people who underestimated you start acting like historians, rewriting the past, editing the truth, pretending they always knew. Let them. That's what weak egos do when reality proves them wrong. They'll try to attach themselves to the version of you they didn't help create. They'll try to claim front row tickets to a show they booed during rehearsal. But my dear chosen ones, hear me. This isn't about revenge. It's about dominance through discipline. It's about turning every insult into fuel, every doubt into focus, every betrayal into backbone. It's about walking so solid that your silence becomes louder than their opinions. Because you're entering the "you thought you knew me" chapter, the chapter where the overlooked becomes undeniable, the chapter where the quiet one becomes the headline, the chapter where the person they treated like a lesson becomes the example. And if you're feeling that shift, if your chest feels tight like something is building, don't ignore it. That's not paranoia. That's pattern recognition. That's your instincts catching up to what your life has been preparing. So here's what I need you to do. Chosen one, don't just listen, lock in, hit like, subscribe, and if this message is landing in your bones, drop 777 in the comments as your signal that you're done shrinking to keep people comfortable. Not for luck, not for mysticism, for commitment, for momentum, for identity, for I'm not going back. Chosen ones, before we move any further, pause right here with me. If these words are hitting something deep, if they're putting strength back in your spine and fire back in your focus, support this message. Hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Not for algorithms, but so we can keep showing up with content that challenges limits, rewires mindsets, and fuels real transformation. Every like tells us this message matters. Every subscription helps us keep pouring energy into content that lifts, sharpens, and empowers people who refuse to stay small. This is how you support the movement and how we keep delivering power straight to you. Because from this point on, the story doesn't reverse. The pieces you thought were gone start circling back. The doors you thought were closed start cracking open. The people who ignored you start watching from the sidelines, and the same ones who doubted you the loudest are about to sit in silence, trying to understand how the person they counted out became the one nobody can ignore. Stay with me, chosen one. We're not here to play nice with the narrative they wrote about you. We're here to replace it. And before we go any further, let me speak directly to you, chosen one. If this message feels personal, if it feels like someone finally put words to what you've been living, then don't just listen, stand with us. Support this work by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. That simple action keeps this energy alive and allows us to keep delivering content that wakes people up, strengthens minds, and pushes lives forward. Drop 77 in the comments as a quiet signal that you're ready to own your rise, even if it shocks the people around you. And now, let's move step by step, because if you're truly chosen, these signs won't feel random. Let's get started. Number 1. The silent build that made them misread you, built in silence, revealed in impact. People laugh at what they don't understand, until it stands up and towers over them. My dear chosen ones, this is where it begins to hit them the hardest. Not with noise, not with announcements, but with the realization that while they were busy judging what they could see, you were becoming something they could never predict. They called you the failure, remember? They said you were falling behind, losing time, wasting potential. And yet somehow you're the one still standing with depth, resilience, and a presence that makes rooms shift when you enter. That alone already exposes how wrong they were. Here's what unsettles them most, chosen ones. They thought they had you figured out. They watched you struggle up close. They saw the exhaustion in your eyes, the moments you doubted yourself, the nights you questioned everything. They studied your pain like evidence. To them, your struggle was a conclusion. To you, it was training. They mistook the grind for the ending because they've never seen what real preparation looks like. Let me say this clearly. Chosen ones, what they called failure, was actually formation. You weren't breaking down. You were being built under pressure most people would have folded under. While they were comparing you to siblings, cousins, friends, or anyone who made them feel superior, you were being placed into a mental and emotional forge. Heat, weight, resistance. The kind of environment that doesn't produce average outcomes. They were reading your life like spectators who only see the first act and think they understand the entire story. But this was never the full picture. This was just the setup. And here's the part that hits the enemy right in the chest. Your slow progress wasn't a flaw, it was concealment. You weren't meant to rise early. You were meant to rise undeniable. Ask yourself this, chosen one, because this question matters. Why did you have to carry so much while others didn't? Why were you pushed into isolation while others stayed comfortable? Why did life force you to grow up faster, think deeper, and stand alone longer? It wasn't random. It was because you could handle it. Because only you had the capacity to endure pressure without losing your integrity. Only you could stay quiet while people talked. Only you could pause without quitting. People thought you were stuck. You weren't stuck. You were setting roots. And anyone who's ever built something real knows this truth. What grows deep doesn't announce itself early. From the surface, a seed underground looks like nothing. Just dirt, no movement, no proof. And that's exactly how they looked at your life. They saw nothing. Meanwhile, beneath the surface, structure was forming that would outlast every voice that laughed at you. They judged your chapter 1 as if they had read the whole book. They measured your worth by your lowest moments, ignoring battles you fought internally that they wouldn't survive for a week. They noticed your exhaustion but missed your endurance. They noticed your breakdowns but ignored your rebuilds. They noticed your delays but overlooked your discipline. They were looking through a cracked lens and still convinced they knew the truth. And let's get real for a moment, chosen ones, because truth isn't always gentle. Some people felt safer when you were struggling. Your pain made them feel ahead. Your setbacks gave them comfort. Your confusion gave them stories. They didn't just doubt you, they relied on your stagnation to avoid facing their own limits. You staying small kept them feeling big. That's why things shifted the moment you started changing internally. Before you ever announced growth, they felt it. That's why the energy around you changed. That's why conversations felt different. That's why some people got quiet, distant, awkward. They sensed the ground moving before the structure appeared. When someone has built their confidence on your limitations, your evolution feels like a threat. Chosen ones hear this clearly. The isolation wasn't punishment, it was protection. Every season where you felt alone, drained, or confused wasn't chaos. It was alignment. Distractions were removed. Wrong voices were muted. Comfort was stripped away. Not to hurt you, but to sharpen you. You were being separated from anything that would dilute the version of you that was forming. And look at you now. After everything that tried to bury you, you didn't just survive. You adapted. You learned. You hardened where it mattered and softened where it counted. You became someone the old version of you wouldn't recognize. Your posture changed. Your thinking changed. Your patience turned into precision. You no longer move out of desperation. You move with intent. That's why this phase scares them. They can feel the shift even if they won't admit it. They see the discipline in your silence, the calm in your confidence, the weight in your presence. They're trying to process how the person they dismissed is becoming the one people can't ignore. And that confusion? That discomfort? That's the sound of their old narrative collapsing. Here's the final truth for this chapter, chosen ones. They were never meant to understand the work done in silence. They were only meant to witness the impact. This isn't your explanation phase. This is your reveal. And the same ones who laughed at the dirt will soon be staring at roots too deep to uproot. Stay steady. This is only the beginning. Number 2, the waiting period that turned you into a threat. The pause that turned you into a problem. While they were counting your steps, you were sharpening your blade. Chosen ones, this is the part they never saw coming, and that's exactly why it's dangerous. They mistook your slowdown for surrender. They looked at your delays and assumed you were finished. In their minds, if nothing was moving fast, nothing important was happening. But here's the truth they can't digest. Your pause wasn't weakness. It was calibration. You weren't stopped. You were being tuned for impact. Sit with this for a moment, chosen one. Do you really believe all that waiting was random? All those closed doors, unanswered efforts, long stretches where nothing shifted no matter how hard you pushed. Do you think life simply forgot about you? No. That delay was deliberate. It was shaping you into someone who wouldn't crack under the weight of what's coming. They only saw you waiting. They had no idea reality was rearranging itself so that when you finally moved, it wouldn't be a small step. It would be decisive. Your family didn't understand that. They looked at your pauses and called them failures. They whispered questions behind your back. Why is nothing working for them? They compared your timeline to everyone else's and used your slow seasons as proof that you weren't special, that you missed your chance, that you were falling behind. What they never considered is that speed isn't power. Control is. And you were learning control. Here's what most people never realize. Arriving too early can be just as destructive as never arriving at all. If you had landed in certain spaces before you were ready, they would have swallowed you. If you had risen before you developed boundaries, discipline, and clarity, the wrong people would have taken advantage of you. Delay isn't denial. Delay is preparation disguised as inconvenience. Ask yourself honestly, chosen one, if everything you wanted had arrived the first time you asked for it, would you have known how to protect it? Would you have recognized who deserved access to you and who didn't? Or would you have handed your progress to people who only saw your value once it benefited them? The delay taught you discernment. It forced you to see patterns, intentions, and truths that fast success would have hidden. Think of it like this. Life plays chess while most people play checkers. You were frustrated because your piece hadn't moved in several turns. From your seat, it looked like nothing was happening. But above the board, the entire game was being repositioned so that when you moved, it wouldn't be a casual advance. It would be a decisive strike. The delay didn't forget you. It blocked every route that would have wasted you. And here's the part that quietly embarrassed them. Some people enjoyed your slowness. It made them feel ahead. Your delays became their comfort zone. When you weren't progressing fast, they could relax. They thought, good, they're back where they belong. Your speed threatened their identity, so your pause felt like relief. What they didn't understand is that life doesn't operate to keep anyone comfortable. There's another layer to this, chosen ones, and it matters. If you had risen too early, people around you would have claimed credit. They would have said they helped you, shaped you, guided you. Your progress would have been diluted by their narratives. That couldn't happen. Your rise needed to be clean, undeniable, owned by no one but you. That's why it took longer. Not because you were unlucky, but because your outcome couldn't be shared. Imagine walking into a room now carrying everything you've become. Confidence that doesn't beg, boundaries that don't apologize, self-respect that doesn't explain itself, purpose that doesn't seek approval. And when your family looks at you, they don't recognize this version. That shock, the pause in their voices, the confusion in their eyes, that moment is exactly why the delay existed. You had to become unrecognizable. You probably asked yourself this question more times than you can count. Why is everyone else moving faster than me? Because not everyone is carrying the same weight. Some journeys don't involve breaking cycles, confronting generational habits, or rewriting expectations. Yours does. You weren't just building a future, you were dismantling patterns. That takes time, that takes pressure, that takes endurance. Picture a bow pulled all the way back. To anyone watching, it looks like retreat, like failure, like going backward. But the pullback isn't weakness, it's stored force. That tension is what determines how far the arrow flies. That was your delay. It was pressure before release, strength before speed, preparation before acceleration. Most people want outcomes without endurance. You didn't get that luxury. You had to wait. You had to endure moments that felt pointless, uncomfortable, even humiliating. But every delay added depth to your character, clarity to your vision, and steel to your backbone. Others saw stagnation. You were incubating. And here's the truth that lands hardest. The delay lasted until people stopped expecting anything from you. Your rise needed to be unexpected. When it hits, they won't be able to explain it away as luck. They'll have to face the reality they avoided. The one they doubted the most became the one no one can deny. The delay wasn't a pause, it was pressure, it was precision. And the version of you stepping forward now, that version is exactly why your rise is about to shock your whole family. Number 3. The dark phase they assumed would finish you. Built in the shadows, too strong for the spotlight. They cheered under the lights, not knowing the real work was happening where applause can't reach. Chosen ones, this was the season that tested you mentally more than anything else. Not because it was loud or dramatic, but because it was quiet, invisible, and lonely. This was the phase where doubt didn't come from enemies alone. It came from watching everyone else move forward while you stayed still. You stood in the background while others were celebrated like they cracked some secret code to life. You watched cousins climb, siblings get praised, friends level up, and it felt like rewards were being handed out to everyone except you. And no one noticed how heavy that silence felt. No one asked how you were holding up. No one clapped for your endurance. And in those moments, you asked questions that haunted you. Why does it feel like I'm stuck? Why am I always the one waiting? Why am I watching from the shadows while others shine? Did I do something wrong? Am I missing something everyone else figured out? Chosen ones, let me answer that clearly, because this is where the enemy got it wrong. Nothing was wrong with you. You weren't being overlooked. You were being isolated on purpose. This shadow season wasn't a punishment. It was protection. Life wasn't delaying you. It was shielding you. You weren't meant to rise early in rooms that couldn't hold who you were becoming. You weren't meant to be visible before you were solid, because visibility without stability destroys people, and you were being built for impact, not applause. Imagine a diamond buried deep inside a dark mine. No one praises it, no one frames it, no one shows it off. It sits underground, surrounded by pressure, heat, and time. From the outside, it looks like nothing, just rock, just darkness. But that darkness is exactly what turns it into something unbreakable. That was you. While others shined fast under weak lights, you were forming strength no spotlight could create. Chosen ones, this is where the enemy underestimated you. They thought obscurity meant failure. They thought silence meant weakness. They thought being unseen meant being unimportant. But what they didn't understand is this. People who rise too early often fall the hardest, and people who are hidden long enough rise with roots. Here's another truth that might sting when you hear it. If your rise had come earlier, back when you were craving validation, you would have trusted the wrong people with your progress. You would have shared your wins with people who only smile when it benefits them. Some family members don't celebrate growth. They attach themselves to it. They claim it. They reshape it. They rewrite your story until your success sounds like it belongs to them. You were protected from that. The shadows kept unclean hands away from your future. The silence kept false supporters from touching your breakthrough. The distance taught you discernment. You learned who needs to know and who doesn't. You learned that not everyone deserves access to your becoming, and that lesson alone makes you dangerous in the best way. Chosen ones, your sacrifices weren't wasted. Every night you pushed through without recognition mattered. Every moment you stayed consistent while unseen mattered. Every time you kept going without praise mattered. Just because no one was watching doesn't mean nothing was happening. Progress doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it builds quietly, waiting for the moment it can't be ignored. And let's be honest, Some people were comfortable while you struggled. Your shadow season gave them relief. It made them feel ahead. It made them feel validated. It gave them something to point at and say, "At least I'm not them." That's why your rise is going to feel so loud to them, because they built their confidence on your invisibility. But that era is ending. The work you did in the dark has finished its job. The patience, the restraint, the discipline, it's all stacking now. And when you step forward, it won't be gentle, it won't be subtle. It will feel sudden to everyone watching, even though you know it was earned over time. This is the part where people suddenly remember your name. This is the part where they act surprised, even though the signs were always there. This is the part where they pretend they supported you from the start. Let them. That's what happens when the shadow-built finally stand in the light. Chosen ones, your obscurity was the setup. The shadows shaped you. The silence sharpened you. And the same darkness they thought would break you is the reason your rise will shock the very people who never looked your way. Number 4. The private upgrade. No one was allowed to witness, shaped behind closed doors. They laughed at your absence because they never imagined what was being built where they weren't allowed to enter. Chosen one, this part of your story cuts deeper than most people realize, because while they were mocking you for being unseen, something serious was happening beyond their reach. They mistook invisibility for insignificance. They confused silence with failure. They thought being out of sight meant you were out of the race, and that misjudgment is exactly what protected you. While others chased attention, applause, and fast validation, you were pulled somewhere they couldn't follow, not into the spotlight, not onto the stage, but into a closed room where real work gets done. Imagine it clearly, chosen one. While everyone else was rushing to be noticed, to prove something, to shine as quickly as possible, you were redirected. Not to the hallway where people pass through and get judged. Not to the shelf where things are displayed and compared. You were taken behind the scenes. The door closed. The noise stopped. And that's where the shaping began. Slow, intentional, unforgiving, precise. This wasn't punishment. This was refinement. The kind that doesn't care about timelines or applause. The kind that focuses only on quality. They couldn't understand why you weren't being shown off like others. They whispered about it. They compared you to people who got quick attention, quick wins, quick praise. They pointed at siblings, cousins, peers who looked like they were ahead. They mistook visibility for value. But what they never grasped is that things rushed into public often aren't built to last. Fast shine looks impressive until pressure hits, and pressure always hits. You, on the other hand, were being handled differently, carefully, deliberately, privately. That slowness wasn't a setback, it was proof of worth. Anything cheap can be rushed. Anything rare takes time. Anyone who's ever built something meaningful knows this truth. The more valuable the outcome, the stricter the process. And your process was strict for a reason. Ask yourself this, chosen one. Would you really want to be shaped by people who couldn't see beyond surface-level success? Would you want your growth influenced by voices that panic the moment things slow down? Of course not. That's why access to you was limited. That's why not everyone was invited into this phase. Because not everyone has the maturity to witness refinement without interfering. Deep down, you already know this. If your rise had come earlier, the wrong people would have tried to take credit for it. They would have claimed influence they never earned. They would have shaped your confidence to suit their comfort. They would have diluted what makes you powerful, and some of them preferred you unfinished, because a refined version of you would have disrupted the image they built for themselves. Your potential threatened their identity. There are people, even in your own family, who felt safer when you were rough around the edges. As long as you were still in progress, they could feel superior. As long as you were still unseen, they didn't have to confront what your evolution says about them. A polished you forces comparison, a refined you removes excuses, and that's uncomfortable for people who stopped growing years ago. So you were kept away, not hidden out of fear, but protected out of intention. You weren't meant to compete with noise. You were meant to outlast it. Rare things don't argue with common ones. They don't rush to prove themselves. They sit back and let time do the talking, and time has been working on you relentlessly. Now here's where it starts hitting them hard. When you finally step forward, it won't be loud at first. It won't need to be. The quality will speak before you do. The way you carry yourself, the way you respond instead of react, the way you move without explaining. That's when they'll feel it. Not jealousy, disbelief, because they'll realize they were watching the wrong things the entire time. Your refinement will be the shock, not because you bragged, not because you announced it, but because it's undeniable. The depth, the stability, the clarity, those can't be faked. And when people who doubted you are finally faced with the finished result, it will hit harder than any argument ever could. Chosen one, understand this clearly. You were never meant for the display case. You were never meant to be judged early. You were meant to be secured, protected, perfected. You weren't shaped for attention. You were shaped for impact. And the moment they finally see what was built behind that closed door, they'll understand something too late. You were never overlooked. You were being prepared for a level they were never ready to imagine. Number 5. The invisible season that changed everything. The season that built you while no one was watching. Silence isn't surrender. Silence is where the real upgrades happen. Chosen ones, this is the part of your story that almost nobody understands, especially the people who doubted you the most. They looked at your quiet and assumed you had nothing left. They saw your distance and called it withdrawal. They watched you stop explaining yourself and decided you had given up. What they never realized is that your silence wasn't empty. It was intentional. While they were busy watching for noise, life was rebuilding you where their eyes couldn't reach. Most people only recognize power when it's loud. They think breakthroughs happen on stages, in announcements, in moments that get applause. They believe transformation begins when the crowd finally notices. That's why they missed yours completely. Your growth didn't happen in front of witnesses. It happened behind closed doors, in isolation, in moments where nobody clapped and nobody checked in. And that's exactly why it worked. Chosen ones, the private season is where weak foundations collapse and strong ones form. Away from comparison, away from opinions, away from family voices that would have interfered the moment they felt you slipping out of their control. You weren't hiding. You were being protected from distraction, because some versions of you can only be built when nobody is allowed to comment. They thought you went quiet because you were losing confidence. The truth is, you stopped talking because you were finally listening to yourself. You stopped explaining because you realized the wrong people were taking notes for the wrong reasons. You stopped reacting because you were learning how to move with intention instead of emotion. That's not quitting, that's leveling up. Say this to yourself, chosen one, not as hope, not as wishful thinking, but as identity. What was built in private will be carried with strength in public. You're not unprepared, you're not behind, you're not late, you're loaded. And here's the truth most people never grasp. This wasn't just about your personal success. You weren't shaped for a small life or a quiet impact. You were forged to confront patterns that existed long before you were born. The habits, the stagnation, the emotional shortcuts, the cycles everyone normalized because breaking them required courage they never developed. You're the one who finally said, "This ends with me." That decision alone created a shift your family doesn't even have the language to describe. Some people talk about breaking ceilings. You didn't just break ceilings, you cracked foundations. You questioned behaviors that were never questioned. You refused to repeat patterns that were passed down like tradition. You chose growth over comfort, even when it meant standing alone. And that kind of choice sends shockwaves far beyond your own life. Picture this: generations of habits, silence, and unresolved tension stacked behind you like a wall no one ever attempted to climb. Everyone before you adjusted to it, worked around it, pretended it wasn't there, and then you showed up, not fearless, not fully confident, but willing. Willing to feel uncomfortable, willing to be misunderstood, willing to stand in isolation while something stronger was being built inside you. Your alone time wasn't wasted, it was used. Every night you questioned yourself, every time you felt disconnected, every moment you wondered why things felt so heavy. It was all laying groundwork. You were being stretched to hold something bigger than what the people around you could imagine. That's why it felt lonely. Expansion always does. And here's what's coming next, chosen ones. When your family finally sees who you've become, it won't just be surprise, it'll be confusion. They won't just notice your success, they'll feel the shift you caused, the way you move differently, the way you no longer seek permission, the way you carry yourself without explaining. That kind of growth doesn't just change one person, it changes the entire dynamic around them. Your hidden season wasn't empty, it was loaded. Every quiet day added weight to your presence. Every unseen struggle added depth to your voice. Every moment of isolation sharpened your clarity. And now, when you step forward, it won't feel forced or loud. It'll feel inevitable. So thank that unseen season, chosen ones, not because it was easy, but because it worked. The silence built you, the distance strengthened you, the private work prepared you. And when your rise becomes visible, it won't need explanation. The impact will speak for itself. Number 6. The barrier you were never supposed to break. The door they swore wasn't real. They mocked the weight you were carrying, not realizing it was meant to open something they were too afraid to touch. Chosen one, this is where everything stops being theoretical and starts getting uncomfortable for them, because you've been standing in front of something your family pretended didn't exist, not because it wasn't real, but because acknowledging it would have meant admitting they were scared. Behind you sits everything they normalized. Fear passed down like tradition, limits dressed up as, "This is just how we are." Cycles repeated so often they started calling them fate. They learned how to survive inside the cage. You were born with the instinct to test the lock. They underestimated you because they thought you'd blend in. They assumed you'd accept the same ceilings, the same excuses, the same quiet frustration they swallowed every day. They saw you struggle and figured they'll fall in line eventually. What they didn't understand is that struggle wasn't breaking you, it was positioning you. You weren't lost. You were standing at the edge of something that demanded courage instead of compliance. Picture it clearly, chosen one, a massive rusted gate bent under the weight of generations. Everyone before you walked up to it at some point. They felt the cold metal, sensed the resistance, and walked away. Too heavy, too risky, too unfamiliar. They convinced themselves it wasn't worth it and learned how to live with the view instead. Then came you, tired, confused, isolated, carrying questions no one ever answered for you, and instead of backing away, you grabbed the handle. You didn't open it cleanly or quickly. You leaned your entire being into it. Every delay became leverage. Every disappointment became pressure. Every lonely night became strength. Inch by inch, something started to move. Not because it was easy, but because you refused to repeat what broke the people before you. Every time you chose courage over comfort, the gate shifted. Every time you said no more instead of this is normal, another lock cracked. Some people inherit safety, you inherited resistance. Some people inherit guidance, you inherited battles. And still, you didn't fold. You asked yourself questions most people avoid their entire lives. Why am I carrying things no one else seems to carry? Why does it feel like I'm fighting for something bigger than me? Why does settling feel heavier than struggling? The answer is simple, chosen one. You were built to open what others avoided. You weren't designed for the easy road. You were designed for the transforming one. Turn around for a moment and look behind you. See the shadows that linger where you came from, the silence, the fear of speaking up, the emotional scarcity, the habit of settling, the quiet regret masked as acceptance. Those ghosts aren't chasing you. They're watching to see if you'll do what no one else did. Watching to see if the gate actually opens. Now look forward, feel the difference. Opportunity doesn't feel rushed, it feels ready. Clarity doesn't scream, it waits. Potential doesn't beg, it expects you to step up. That pull you feel isn't pressure, it's alignment. It's the sense that you're standing exactly where you're supposed to be, even if it scares you, especially because it scares you. And here's the part that will leave them frozen. When that gate finally swings open, and it will, it won't just be about you walking through. They'll watch you hold it open. They'll realize access exists to a life they told themselves was impossible. A life you paid for with discomfort, discipline, and courage they never practiced. They won't understand how you did it, because they never learned how to lean into resistance instead of running from it. Chosen one, this is where responsibility replaces doubt. Choose your tools carefully. Decide clearly and without apology which patterns end with you, which cycles don't get another generation, which fears lose their grip. Say it with your chest, not for them, but for you. This stops with me. This changes through me. Not because you're better, but because you were willing. Your rise isn't an accident, it's a signal. Your strength becomes their exit. Your breakthrough becomes the passage. You didn't just find the gate, you became the one who opens it. Number 7. The perfectly timed shift they never prepared for. Right on time to prove them wrong. Being late is failure. Being precise is domination. Chosen one, timing has always been the part they completely misunderstood about you. They sat on the sidelines of your life, watching the clock instead of the process, whispering among themselves, "Why is it taking so long?" To them, time was evidence against you. Every pause looked like weakness. Every delay looked like defeat. Every quiet season became a rumor they passed around as proof that you weren't special, that you weren't built for more. They mistook silence for stagnation because they don't understand what real preparation looks like. They thought the calendar was your enemy. In reality, timing was your greatest weapon. Let's clear something up, chosen ones, because this truth hits hard. You were never late, not once. You were exact, precise, surgical. Your rise was synced to a moment when no one could rewrite the story, take credit, or explain it away. If things had happened sooner, they would have found excuses, luck, connections, coincidence, help, anything but the truth, anything but admitting they were wrong about you. So life waited. It waited until every easy explanation collapsed, until your progress looked impossible, until the same people who doubted you felt comfortable enough to say it out loud. They counted you out publicly. They relaxed. They stopped watching closely. They assumed the story was over. And that's exactly when timing did what timing does best. It set the trap. Chosen one, premature success creates fragile wins. It cracks under pressure. But perfectly timed success, that kind of rise can't be denied, dismissed, or debated. It stands on its own. It doesn't need defending. And that's why your life unfolded the way it did. Think about it like this. You were a storm sitting quietly on the horizon. From a distance, everything looked calm. Clear skies, no movement, no warning signs. They looked at your life and said, "Nothing's happening." But they didn't see the pressure building. They didn't feel the atmosphere shifting. They didn't sense the conditions lining up. Storms don't announce themselves to people who aren't paying attention. They hit. And when they do, everyone suddenly understands what was forming all along. That's your rise. You probably asked yourself questions that still linger. Why not earlier? Why did everyone else seem to move faster? Why did I have to wait while they celebrated? Because earlier would have been manageable for their ego. Earlier would have been explainable. Earlier would have let them feel comfortable staying the same. Later changes everything. Later forces reflection. Later forces regret. Later forces silence. Chosen ones, your timing was designed to haunt every doubt they ever spoke over you. When your elevation arrives, and it won't feel gradual to them. It will feel sudden, overnight, out of nowhere. But you'll know better. You'll know it was built slowly, deliberately, patiently. Every closed door taught you discernment. Every delay sharpened your discipline. Every pause trained your endurance. You weren't idle, you were calibrating. Here's what they never understood. Timing isn't about speed, it's about impact. If your life had unfolded faster, the wrong people would have had access. The wrong voices would have influenced decisions. The wrong hands would have touched what they didn't earn. Timing protected you from being shaped by people who never believed in you. It forced you to grow alone so that when the moment arrived, your confidence would be internal, not borrowed. That's why when things start moving now, they'll move differently, cleaner, faster, with less explanation. You won't feel the need to announce anything. Your results will speak first. And that silence you learned to survive in, it will become the reason your presence feels heavy in rooms that once dismissed you. They'll replay conversations in their head. They'll remember the jokes, the comments, the looks, the assumptions, and it will hit them all at once. They were wrong about you. Not a little wrong, completely wrong. Chosen one, your timing wasn't late. It was lethal. It waited until you were strong enough not to fold under attention, wise enough not to trust too easily, and grounded enough not to shrink again. It waited until your rise would do more than impress. It would expose. Expose how small their vision was. Expose how shallow their judgments were. Expose how limited their understanding has always been. So if you're feeling movement now, momentum, clarity, confidence, don't rush it. Don't question it. This isn't a fluke. This is the release point. This is the moment when all the waiting starts making sense. Your timing didn't fail you. It positioned you. And when it hits, they won't just notice. They'll remember every time they doubted you. Number 8. The payoff. They laughed at until it arrived. The payoff they never budgeted for. They laughed at the effort because they never planned to stay long enough to see the return. Chosen one, this part of the story is personal because timing has always been the battlefield where they tried to defeat you. Not by stopping you outright, but by making you question yourself. They watched you grind early. They watched you commit when there was no applause, no proof, no visible reward. And instead of respect, you got ridicule, side comments, eye rolls, quiet jokes about how you were trying too hard, too soon, for something that might never happen. You remember it clearly. You were planting while everyone else was spectating. You were building when they were busy gossiping. You were learning, failing, adjusting, showing up again while they were busy debating whether you were doing too much. They told you to slow down, to wait, to be more realistic, to do it the normal way. Funny thing is, most of them had never finished anything meaningful themselves, yet they spoke with confidence about a journey they never had the courage to walk. Here's the truth they didn't want to accept. Chosen one, you didn't move early because you were impatient. You moved early because you understood something they didn't. Results don't come to those who wait for comfort. They come to those who prepare before it makes sense. You didn't follow noise, you followed instinct. You followed discipline. You followed a sense of timing that wasn't visible on the surface but felt undeniable on the inside. Think of it like this. A farmer doesn't ask the crowd when to plant. He doesn't wait for approval from people who've never grown anything. He studies the conditions. He understands cycles. He knows that if he waits until it feels easy, it's already too late. The harvest doesn't adjust itself to people's opinions. People either align with the season or they miss it. That's exactly how your life has been unfolding. While others chased shortcuts, you stayed consistent. While others looked for quick wins, you focused on foundations. While others mocked the grind, you stayed loyal to the process. And at the time, it looked foolish to them, unnecessary, excessive. They couldn't imagine a future where that effort would matter because they were only thinking in short timelines. You were thinking in outcomes. Chosen one, this is why they underestimated you. They judged your work by how it looked in the beginning, not by what it was designed to produce in the end. They saw effort without immediate reward and assumed it was wasted. They didn't understand that real payoff is quiet while it's forming, invisible, patient, ruthless in its timing. You probably asked yourself more than once, am I doing too much too early? Let me answer that clearly. No, you were doing exactly what was required for the future you're stepping into. Your discipline wasn't premature. It was preventative. It protected you from scrambling later. It protected you from panic. It protected you from needing validation when the pressure increased. And here's the part that hits them hardest. When the payoff shows up, it won't ask for permission. It won't explain itself. It won't argue. It will simply exist, solid, visible, undeniable. And suddenly, the same people who laughed at your patience will be forced to sit with the reality they didn't plan for. Because when the season changes, chosen one, excuses don't grow food. Preparation does. When the results start stacking, nobody will remember how loudly they doubted. They'll remember how quiet they are now. Their questions will replace their comments. Their curiosity will replace their criticism. And your progress, measured, earned, sustained, will answer every doubt without you saying a word. This is how your rise shocks them, not because it's flashy, but because it's thorough, not because it's sudden, but because it's complete. You didn't rush, you didn't copy, you didn't follow the crowd. You stayed committed while they stayed comfortable, and comfort never produces harvest. So stand firm in this truth, chosen one, and say it like you mean it. Not as a wish, not as a hope, but as ownership. My timing is aligned with my effort. My consistency is paying off. What I planted is coming back multiplied. They laughed at the work. They weren't prepared for the results. And when the payoff finally fills your hands, remember this: you earned every bit of it while they were busy watching. Number 9. The rise that leaves no room for doubt. The rise that leaves them without words. They thought you would rise quietly. They expected something small, manageable, easy to dismiss. They assumed that if you ever made progress, it would be subtle enough for them to explain away. But chosen one, your elevation was never designed to be polite. It was never meant to blend in or wait for approval. When things finally move in your favor, it won't creep in through the back door. It will arrive like a plot twist no one prepared for, forcing everyone who doubted you to stop mid-sentence and reassess everything they thought they knew. Your rise won't whisper, it will thunder, and that's exactly why it will leave them speechless. Here's what they never accounted for. They assumed your limits were permanent. They treated your struggle like a definition instead of a phase. They thought the version of you they saw during your hardest moments was the final draft. In their minds, your story had already peaked, or worse, already ended. So when opportunities begin showing up that no one in your family line has ever touched, when doors open that were never even considered possible, the shock won't come from jealousy alone. It will come from exposure, because your success will highlight how wrong they were. And that's the part they won't say out loud. Your elevation won't just surprise them, it will confront them. Every dismissive comment, every sideways look, every moment they underestimated you will come rushing back the second they see you standing somewhere they never imagined you'd reach. Your rise becomes a mirror, and not everyone is comfortable facing their own reflection. Some will look away, some will get quiet, some will suddenly remember how supportive they always were. But deep down, they'll know the truth, and so will you. Imagine this. Chosen one. A door that's been closed for generations. Not even considered a door, really. More like a wall everyone accepted as permanent. Your family learned to live around it, explain it away, normalize the limitation. That's just how things are, they said. But one day, you step forward and the handle turns. Not because you forced it, not because you begged, but because you aligned yourself with the work, the growth, the preparation that most people avoid. And when that door opens for you, it won't just change your path. It will rewrite what everyone thought was possible. That's how your elevation happens, not through noise, but through precision. What will confuse them even more is that the transformation won't only be external. It won't just be the position, the success, or the recognition. It will be you. Your confidence will be steady, not loud. Your presence will carry weight without needing explanation. Your energy will feel different, focused, grounded, unshakable. People who once ignored you will suddenly pay attention. People who spoke over you will start listening. Family members who doubted you will study you closely, trying to figure out how the person they dismissed became the one no one can overlook. And here's something important, chosen one. This rise isn't about making anyone feel small. It's not about revenge or proving points out loud. It's about clarity. It's about showing, without speeches or arguments, that the work you did in silence mattered, that the patience, discipline, and restraint you practiced when no one was watching weren't wasted. Your elevation is proof that unseen effort compounds. First comes the shock, then come the questions, then comes the realization. They'll start connecting dots they ignored before. They'll remember moments you struggled through alone. They'll recall times you were written off, underestimated, or overlooked. And slowly, it will sink in that nothing about your rise is random. It's too specific, too precise, too aligned with the sacrifices you made when applause wasn't available. No one in the room will be able to honestly call it luck, because luck doesn't explain consistency. Luck doesn't explain resilience. Luck doesn't explain how you kept moving forward while carrying weight most people avoid their entire lives. Your rise will make one thing undeniable. You were always being shaped for something bigger than what they expected. Chosen one, when this elevation fully arrives, and it will, don't rush to explain yourself. Let the results speak. Let the silence do the work. Some people need time to process the fact that the one they doubted became the one who changed the narrative. Your rise won't just shock them. It will redefine what they believe is possible. As we come to the end of this message, take a moment to let it settle. If these words reflected your journey, if they named the pressure, the patience, and the quiet work you've been carrying, then don't let this energy fade here. Support this movement by liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing it with someone who needs this reminder. Drop 77 in the comments if you're stepping fully into your rise, no matter who it shocks. Your support keeps this space alive and allows us to keep delivering messages that challenge limits and fuel real growth.